Now, again, consider the level of the claim here. Allow me to elucidate with an example. If I were to claim to you that Alfred Hitchcock had risen from the dead, what would it take to convince you? If you saw a similar presentation with the same kinds of historical facts that have just been presented and the same kind of appeals to Scripture, but the claim was, instead of Jesus rising from the dead, Alfred Hitchcock, would any of you be convinced? I certainly wouldn't be. Now, imagine I say that I have a set of texts that are not internally coherent. They're not confirmed by any other historical data, and elsewhere within these sources, there's myth and allegory, and we can't really tell which is which. And it's these texts that have given me the evidence that Alfred Hitchcock rose from the dead. This certainly would not be enough for any intelligent person to accept, even just if the claim was not as extraordinary as somebody raising from the dead. But with the level of the claim, I think we should require a whole lot more than this. Imagine you found a book on nutrition, and it contained a similar level of inaccuracies. The chapters contradict each other, and you become convinced that somehow the recipes may be allegorical in some areas and not in others. And then the book makes an outrageous claim, like that you should cut fiber from your diet entirely. Would you trust that claim? Of course you wouldn't. And that's not just because the claim is so ridiculous. It's because you have evidence that the book is not trustworthy. Now, again, we're limited in time, and there's more to be discussed here in terms of the evidence that's been provided. But one thing I want to point out is that this is something of an irrelevancy, because there's still a...
Okay, before we get into this irrelevancy, what are your thoughts here, Josh?
I mean, if he's talking about irrelevancy, do you know what also is irrelevant? His entire argument. No, I'm joking. I don't want to do that.
Yikes. We love you, Alex.
but to be serious, I would like to just say that let's judge the case for the resurrection with Alex's standards. First of all, he said it is not internally coherent. Well, in reality, no. I just want people to understand, if there's any takeaway that you come from this video, is that there is no such thing as a completely similar or a completely coherent body of works. And I'm not saying a completely coherent text. Of course, you could find that. But what we're seeing in the Bible is a body of works. It is a collection of different texts. It's a collection of different books put together by different writers. So that's how we should view the Bible. In the same way, we're looking at the historical case for the Christianity, or any other thing in history. Look at all the text for the Tet Offensive. Look at all the text for the Peloponnesian Wars, anything. Find me a first coherent text or a body of works. You'll never find that. I could assure you that unless you find only one person writing about the situation, you'll never find a completely coherent set of works about the text. So that I don't think is a historically strong argument. Secondly, he says it's not confirmed by any other data. It's only one book. That is not the case. Within the Bible itself, there's at least 4 sources which talk about the resurrection. Building upon that, that's not to mention Tacitus, Suetonius, Josephus, Justin Martyr, Tertullian, and others who constantly raise different parts of the resurrection account, the different facts that we use to point towards the resurrection. So this is not just one account that we're looking at. There's at least 10, if not more, accounts. Then finally, his idea about myth and allegory, I don't necessarily think it's a problem, especially if we're looking at a historical text. And as you can see here, I'm looking at this purely from a historical perspective, not about religious theology, any of that. I'm throwing all those doctrines out the window on purpose, just to look at this from a purely historical case. We can see that throughout history, throughout the works that we use, myth and allegory are just so ripe and so commonly used. For example, in Herodotus, one of the greatest historians for Greek history around 400 to 500 BC, he talks about gods. He talks about ants coming out of the sea. I mean, these are clearly allegories. I don't think anyone has ever tried to believe that Herodotus was especially saying historically ants were literally crawling out of the sea and fighting against Greeks. I don't necessarily think that is the case. So, I mean, throughout history, we see myths and allegories, but that doesn't take away from what we can gain historically from the source. So I don't necessarily think that, Alex, if we're just looking at this purely historically, there is any substantive criticism that he raises.
Mm-hmm. You make a really good point, Josh. If you don't want any discrepancies in to believe a historical phenomena, you're going to have to deny most of history, because anytime you have more than one account, there's going to be minor details where sources are going to disagree. But just because they disagree on minor details doesn't mean we throw out the event as a whole. That'd just be really bad history. Historians would be out of a job. And yeah, that'd be really bad. So we don't want that. Because if we say that's a problem, well, then 9/11 deniers and Holocaust deniers can use similar arguments to Alex and say, hey, there's discrepancies in the accounts. So the event must have just not happened. So yeah, I just add on, but that was really good, Josh. So yeah.